Hey there, my name is LexC, and thank you so much for joining me today. Right now, I'm going to be reviewing the book, The Pursuit of Happiness by Gardner. And the reason why I was so intrigued to read this book is because I first saw the movie Pursuit of Happiness starring Will and Jaden Smith, and I don't think I realized it was based on a book by then. So to figure out that it was actually based on a book, and then to actually come across the book in one of those free libraries. It's like those boxes around the city where they have books in them for people to just take and put their old books into. And it's a way that the community shares, right? So when I came across this book, I was very excited to read it, and I'm finally done with it and want to give my honest review on it. So if that's something you are interested in hearing about, then stay tuned. I found this book in one of those free library boxes around the city, which is an amazing idea, by the way. So people put in their old books, and you take books from the box, and it's just free books. Like, who doesn't like that? I don't know. I love it. So this book is 302 pages long, and it took me in total probably 2 weeks of reading. I actually read this over the span of like 2 months because I wasn't disciplined, honestly, in reading the book and, just having a daily routine where I get into at least one chapter or at least like 10 pages, So it took me a little longer than it should have to read it, but I'm telling you that it should only take like the span of 2 weeks to read. It's a very good read, and there are so many things that this book talks about that was not mentioned in the movie. So after I finished reading this book, I actually went back and watched the movie Pursuit of Happiness on Netflix. And yeah, on Netflix. I was going to say this on Netflix, but I just said that. So Pursuit of Happiness is on Netflix. Again, that's starring Will Smith and Jaden Smith. And I just want to make sure that y'all realize, just like I realized, because I'm thinking about the movie as I'm reading the book, and I'm like, yo, there are a lot of things that are talked about in the book, like way more backstory and way more history before we get to the point that we see in the movie Pursuit of Happiness. And I looked at the movie on Netflix and saw that, it's inspired by the book. Not based on the book, it is inspired by the book. So what I appreciate about the movie is the emotions that are talked about in this book. It's so perfectly portrayed by Will Smith's character, by Will Smith playing Gardner in the movie. So something that, you can kind of feel the struggle from what the person is talking about, from what Gardner is talking about in this book. But it's a whole different ballgame to see that emotion play out on the screen, So I'm very appreciative of the fact that the movie was so able to capture that from the book. So I talked about how the movie missed out on way more of the backstory. Well, Gardner grew up in a rural town. Mom was getting abused by his stepfather. He didn't meet his real father until he was 28 years old. And because of him not having his real father in his life, he was always determined to make sure that when he had kids, he would be present and active in the lives of his kid. That plays an important role in how we see the character play out in the movie, as well as what happens in the book, right? So his mom was abused, and he never met his real dad. He grew up with a lot of anger because of that. And he was also sexually assaulted, as well as physically assaulted. And he went through a lot as a kid. Him and his sisters they were separated at one point. Mom was in and out of jail. So getting beat up by the stepdad, but then being put into jail because of the stepdad. And they bounced around from relatives' homes. Yet somehow through all of that, his mom encouraged him to, anything you put your mind to, you can do it. You just have to put in the work. You just have to put your mind to it. And so it's interesting to see that despite the fact that she went through so much, she was still able to encourage him to go beyond this, do better than what you see here, do more. And Chris Gardner actually went into the Navy, and he never got a formal degree in the medical field, but he worked as like a lab tech and actually did surgeries, and then later went on to train doctors in, like, I think it was like some Ivy League kind of schools, but he went on to train the students who were to become future doctors. All of this without a medical degree. So that just goes to show how dedicated he was and how hardworking he was and determined he was to figure something out, despite the seemingly challenging aspect of not having the formal degree, or a lot of times the money to pursue a formal degree. He always figured out a way to get what he wanted. And that's really inspirational for me as a music artist. If you are new to this channel, I'm a singer, songwriter, audio engineer, model, voice actor, writer, all kinds of things. But when it comes to the music especially, when I read stories about people defying the odds and sticking to something and coming out on the other end more prosperous, more successful than when they started, it's really inspirational for me, because music is a very tough industry to break into and be a part of. So to read something like this where, he didn't necessarily have all the qualifications of the people he was placed in the room with, but somehow he outshined and outworked these people. That's really inspirational. So like I said, he grew up in kind of a tumultuous way, went from family members home to family members home, separated from his mom because she was always going to prison because of the stepdad. She was always abused by the stepdad. He was abused by the stepdad. And it's very interesting also to see how much his mom encouraged him, because you have the contrast of his stepdad, Freddie, who was always knocking him down a peg and bringing him down. So I love that dynamic that's being shown in the story. That's something that you would probably see in movies where they try to contrast characters. But why, when I decide to record, they decide to come to work? Overall, this book was very easy to read and very easy to get through. The chapters were interesting and they weren't too long to where I felt like I wasn't making progress, but they weren't so short to where it felt like it was going too quickly. I feel like there was the right amount of detail given in this book about Chris and his family and his upbringing. And so like I said, he grew up in a weird situation, abusive physically, mentally, but he had his mom to help to push him to make sure he's still trying to be the best he can, despite the situation and the background that he's coming from. I already mentioned about his dad having multiple kids, and he didn't meet his dad till he was 28. That plays a role later on. The character of Chris Gardner himself, what I would say from this, because this is a true story, right? This is not a fictional book. He is hardworking and determined and willing to do whatever it takes to make it work, willing to do whatever it takes to do what he said he wanted to do. And I identify with those characteristics so much as someone who is interested in music and actively pursuing a career in music and maintaining a career in music. There are a lot of things that I have to... He talks about OJT, which is on-the-job training, which he's always had to do, from, the medical stuff in the Navy to the stockbroker stuff on Wall Street to becoming a father. It was on-the-job training. So things that he had to figure out along the way, nothing that he necessarily was able to prepare for. And when it comes to the music industry, it's very much keep you on your toes kind of industry, and be ready to learn anything at a moment's notice, because anything could happen and things do change at the drop of the dime a lot of times in the music industry. So I can appreciate him mentioning those things. And there were a few quotes that I pointed out on my LexC quotes page on Instagram. One of them had to do with, he was going through a lot of struggles. He was homeless with his son, and he was a single father, and he had to figure out how to make enough money to care for himself and his son. He had to figure out creative ways to keep him and his son fed. and he was acknowledging there was a point in time where he went to jail for like a week because he had unpaid parking tickets. And this was right after he had an argument with his wife, who took his son somewhere that he didn't know where she took him to, and called the cops on him and accused him of hitting her, beating her. And he didn't go to jail for any like domestic disruption, but he went to jail for all the unpaid parking tickets that he incurred doing these different meetings at the different hospitals around the town. Meeting with different doctors at hospitals. Hospitals don't have parking, so he'd be parked in the street, get a parking ticket when he comes back. He wasn't paying the parking tickets, and that caught up with him, and he spent a week in jail. And then he got out, didn't see his son for a while, had to figure out how to survive on his own. Then he finally gets his son back, and the mom is like not able to take care of him, or not willing, right? She was so overwhelmed as a single parent. It was his decision to take his son because, he wanted to be in his son's life. He didn't want anyone to keep his son from him. So there were a lot of times where he didn't have it the way he needed to be able to survive for himself. Add on to that the stress of keeping a child around. And there were a lot of moments in the book where he's describing, feeling like he just can't get ahead, or feeling exhausted and feeling like wanting to give up, but he would throw himself into the job and throw himself into the moment, and that would at least give him a few hours to take his mind off of always worrying about how he's going to survive his next move. And I really like the fact that he pointed that out, because it's extremely relatable. I mean, everybody has been through, I'm sure, at some point in their life, a time where they felt mentally exhausted and like they were running themselves ragged and driving themselves crazy because they were chasing something or building towards something that was just either taking a long time to build, or it was just stretching themselves thin, stressing, not understanding or not knowing where their next paycheck was going to come from, and just becoming depressed at the thought of not doing well in life. And that's something that everybody can relate to at some point or another in their life, especially me, again, when it comes to the music. And again, the movie did a great job of visually showing that portrayal and that frustration, especially the scene where they go into the train station and they have nowhere else to go. They have missed out on shelter for the night because he didn't make it in time to the shelter for them to get a spot in the hotel. And so he takes his son to the train station, and they go in to the bathroom, and it's a private bathroom, one that you can lock from the inside. And he describes, sitting there throughout the day into the night, knowing that it's a safe place, but feeling at his lowest, and people are banging on the door, knocking on the door. He's just trying his hardest to keep his son safe and shield Christopher, his son, from, being too affected by their current circumstances. And in the movie, when Will Smith, they create that game, like imagination. It's like, oh, the dinosaurs, we need to find a safe cave. And that's how they go into the subway bathroom and go to sleep. Oh, that scene was so powerful in the movie, and it perfectly portrays what was going through the mind of Chris and the emotions that he must have been feeling and just breaking down in that moment. Just very, very powerful stuff. Very powerful stuff. A couple of quotes that stood out to me, a couple of sections, I should say, that I didn't put on my LexC Quotes page on Instagram, was when he was talking about the year 1968 and how influential music was for him, because everyone was saying something that mattered. And of course, this sticks out to me because, again, I'm a music head. I'm in music. So, he was talking about, I'm going to read an excerpt. Moms always knew that there were many other influences calling to me, none more powerfully than music. Only later did I truly appreciate how incredible it was to come of age in the heyday of every significant phenomenon that the late 60s produced, with everyone saying something that mattered. From James Brown and Bob Dylan to the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, Jimi Hendrix, Sly Stone, and of course Miles Davis, who capped off the 1960s with his his groundbreaking Bitches Brew, considered by some the greatest musical masterpiece of the 20th century. It was almost as transformational as the invention of jazz itself for me. And I did actually go and listen to that album. It's like an hour 20, hour and a half maybe, of a jazz album. Very good. But this sticks out to me because I agree that music is the most influential thing in this world. And it actually hurts my heart that there's seemingly so much trash right now in the mainstream. And admittedly, I am lazy because I haven't gone out to find the quality stuff. I feel like the quality stuff should be pushed more mainstream, but unfortunately it's not. And I think a lot of the mindsets that we're seeing from people these days, it is in reaction to the music that we're being fed, which in my opinion is not the best for our mental health. So I appreciated him putting in there that it was a great time to grow up in that age of music because everyone had a message, everyone had something to say. I just feel like these days people don't have much to say in the mainstream music. And it's coming at a detriment to people in general. And that's something that I'm actively fighting against, to bring back good music, even if it's just talking about personal experiences, right? Not everybody, it can't be that we're all going through a trap experience. It can't be that we're all trying to take somebody else's man, take somebody else's woman. Everybody's always only focused on the money, you know? That can't be it. So I can appreciate someone pointing out that music was great back then, because I don't feel like it's very great right now. But another section I want to point out is when it's talking about self-knowledge. You have to feel legit inside first. So let me see. In my mother's language, that didn't mean that an intricate knowledge of the Bible or religion was required. Rather, she was talking about self-knowledge, about an authentic belief system, an inner sense of oneself that can never be rocked. Others may question your credentials, your papers, your degrees. Others may look for all kinds of ways to diminish your worth. But what is inside you, no one can take from you or tarnish. This is your worth, who you really are, your degree that can go with you wherever you go, that you bring with you the moment you come into a room, that can't be manipulated or shaken. Without that sense of self, no amount of paper, no pedigree, no credentials can make you legit. No matter what, you have to feel legit inside first. And that sticks out to me, hopefully for obvious reasons. A lot of times people are telling me how good I'm doing, and I look like I'm making major moves, and I look like I'm doing well, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, it's great. Thank you for that recognition. But I myself am not feeling that way necessarily. So this part was really dope to me because I agree. You know, you do have to feel a sense of worth in yourself before you can acknowledge that other people view you as worthy. Or you have to have a sense of success within yourself before you can acknowledge that other people find you to be successful as well. So I really appreciate this part being in the book because I resonate with it. Simple as that. And the last quote that I want to point out is something that talks about the internal struggle and the self-deprecating voice that suddenly comes out of nowhere trying to make you doubt yourself. This is on page 247. The one about feeling legit inside, that was on page 153. Now, this one about the internal struggle and the self-deprecating voice, this is on page 247. And that is, over the 6, 7, 8 months that I'd been without a home, a taunting voice that had lurked in the back of my mind now seemed to suddenly gather strength, right at a time when I could see the finish line. The voice mocked me, sounding a hell of a lot like Freddie, just telling me, "You slick mother effer. Think you so smart because you can read and pass that test, but that don't make you ish, you big-eared mother effer. Who do you think you are?" Sometimes it sounded like a damn sociologist quoting statistics telling me, Unfortunately, your socioeconomic upbringing has predetermined that breaking out of the cycle of poverty and single parenting is highly unlikely given the fact that you are among the 12 to 15% of homeless people who are actually working yet still can't manage a living wage. The voice made me angry and made me fight harder. Who did I think I was? I was Chris Gardner, father of a son who deserved better than what my daddy could do for me, son of Betty Jean Gardner, who said that if I wanted to win, I could win. I had to win, however I was going to do it. Whatever more I had to do, whatever burden I had to carry, I was going to rise up and overcome. But the quicker my pace and the harder I pushed, the louder the self-doubting voice became. Are you crazy? You're deluding yourself. At my lowest point of wanting to finally give up, throw in the towel, call it quits, spend whatever money I'd accumulated and hitchhike to somewhere else, I caught a second wind, a burst of confidence, as a feeling of grace found me. Hold on. That feeling said, hold on. And I do. And again, this is another part of the book that resonated with me because there have been so many times where maybe I was in situations that were going to be immensely beneficial to me, or I was on the cusp, the brink of breaking into successful situations. Y'all have to excuse my talk. I have these retainers, and ever since I straightened my teeth, suddenly I have like a lisp. I guess my mouth is not used to how my jaw is now. And so my tongue like rubs against my teeth in a way that I never knew, because that's not how my mouth was before. But yeah, so excuse the lisping. I feel like I sound like such a lisp. It's coming out of my mouth. But that part of the book resonated with me because I have been on the cusp of what on the outside looking in would be perceived as like a successful situation or a situation that I should want to be a part of. But right on the cusp of what probably should have been some of my happiest, greatest moments, there was always some voice that came in and would like try to shut down and try to discourage me, try to make me feel less confident, try to make me feel like I wasn't as good as I thought I was. And I'm not a cocky person, but I do feel like I'm very skilled and I feel like I'm very good at what I do because I've been doing it for so long and I've had other people tell me that I'm good at it and I've been consistent with it and just all of these things. But I really resonate with that self-deprecating voice suddenly popping up out of nowhere and at the worst possible time when we are feeling so low. And it sucks that it happens, but just know that it does happen. And reading this book, it happened to Chris Gardner, but he's done some amazing things with his life. Like I said earlier in the review, despite having been through so much, despite not having what other people around him have or the connections that other people have, he had to fight through a lot of stuff. And there are just a lot of parallels in this book that I can relate to. Not with having a baby, because I just refuse to do that by myself right now. But so many themes, like I said, the self-deprecating talk, feeling the legit within yourself first, feeling like you don't belong, but still fighting as hard as you can to be in a space where people are telling you you don't belong because you don't have these credentials or you don't have these connections compared to the other people in that field. It really resonates with me. So for that reason, The Pursuit of Happyness, it was a great read and an enjoyable read and a very relatable read. And it helped me to see some of the creative ways that he thought of and approached certain situations. And I can apply those same things for myself and feel more comfortable knowing that, of course, I'm not alone in the things that I go through. It just feels like it at times. But we're never truly alone in what we go through. We just have to keep going through it. And we just have to keep pushing forward, throw ourselves into the work, and in the pursuit of happiness, as long as we continue to pursue, things will get hard, but we will reach that happiness at some point. We will reach those goals that we are working towards, and things do eventually pan out and work in our favor. So thank you so much for listening to this book review. This was The Pursuit of Happyness by Chris Gardner. Highly recommend that you read this, and it's actually a New York Times bestseller. So highly recommend that you read it if you get a chance, and then go check out the movie because it's just nice to read a book and then watch the movie and compare the two and just pick out the differences that you see. The movie is inspired by the book, not based off the book. Inspired. Yes, there is a difference. But thank you so much. Thank you for viewing this and taking the time out of your day to hear this review. Let me know what you think about this review in the comment section down below. Let me know if you've read the book before or if you would be interested in reading the book for yourself. I highly recommend it. And I also want to announce that I finally found a way to get my LexC Quotes page up and running. So I'm going to be, here's the plan. Oops, sorry. So my next read is, and I actually have to put the cover back on. Hold on. So my next read is actually going to be Omarion, Unbothered, The Power of Choosing Joy. I took the cover off because when I put it in my bag, I don't want the cover to get all messed up and, ripped or whatever. But it's a hardback. So yeah, the next read is going to be Unbothered, The Power of Choosing Joy by Omarion, one of my favorite singers from B2K. I grew up watching him. And so let's circle this back around to how this involves LexC Quotes. So my LexC Quotes page, if you go on Instagram, LexC Quotes, LexCQuotes, I will be posting quotes from the book that I am currently reading. And I will be adding I will be adding a audio aspect to it. So I've decided that I will turn these into like a guided reading. So I don't know who would want to read this live with me, but if you don't have the opportunity to buy the book for yourself or read the book for yourself, then make sure on Spotify or Apple Podcasts that you go search out LexC Quotes. And I've decided that I will be reading these books and providing the, so I'm sorry, I got like scatterbrain these days and I feel like my mind is just not as clear as it used to be. But okay, so on LexC Quotes, right, the plan is to read from a chapter each time I go through. I'm going to record it and post it to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And at the end of the chapter, I'm going to do a quick reflection of that, kind of like what I did when I pulled certain quotes from the different parts of The Pursuit of Happyness. I'll be doing the same thing with future books. So pulling quotes to post on the LexC Quotes Instagram, as well as talk about it after I read the chapter. Talk about, do a little review and things that stuck out to me at the end of the chapter, at the end of that reading, right? And then when I'm done with the book, do a full-on book review like I'm doing here right now. And so really, if you don't necessarily have the time to read books like you want to, then you can recommend them to me and I will read them for you and we'll go over it on LexC Quotes. So that's LexC Quotes on YouTube, LexC Quotes on Instagram, LexC Quotes on Spotify Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And let's follow along and have a little community where we read together and we talk about these books together. I think it'll be really dope. So if you like books and you like reading books or hearing about books, then I would highly encourage you to, join that community. And yeah, like this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified each and every time I post a new video. And then if you want exclusive or early access to things like this, then go to my Patreon at patreon.com/LexCATL. There are 3 different tiers for $5, $10, $25. It's mostly geared towards people in music. So if you feel like you could benefit from one-on-one consultations and having your songs reviewed and getting advice about things in the industry or in life or whatever, really, then decide which tier you'd like to join on patreon.com/LexCATL, and I'll be very grateful to you. But thank you so much for joining me in this book review for The Pursuit of Happyness by Gardner. My name is LexC. Until next time, peace.